Good morning. Welcome. This is the Patriot Radio News Hour. I am Jason, solo host. Joe's on vacation. He'll be back on Monday, unless something else arises from his trip. But we'll be back to your two-host situation starting Monday. We are the Gold and Silver Company on radio in Arizona and Colorado. We've been selling gold and silver. I've been doing it almost 8 years. Joe's been doing it longer. Patriot Trading Group's been doing it for right up to about 30 years. One of the longest running radio shows in the country. Actually, it's not. I don't think it's the longest, but it's close. And selling gold and silver the whole time. Decades of selling gold and silver, and how you take advantage of buying gold and silver, call 800-951-0592, and we will get you all lined up with the gold and silver specials that we have on a daily basis. I am running silver and gold for the first time this week. Kind of has a little bit of a down day, not a lot. I'm checking silver down about 25 cents. Still over $39, which is what it propelled over this week. So silver got above $39 this week, and it stayed there, which is great. It's $39.08. I got gold at $3,372, so it dipped a little bit. It went down late yesterday, and then went down a little bit more today. So gold is still in that $3,400 range right now at $3,374. So I will go ahead and continue on with the silver special. I think the Canadian Maple Leafs are getting a little thin as far as how many rolls we have. We have rolls of Canadian Maple Leafs, 25 ounces to the roll, $985. And we still have some, and I haven't gotten a count from Arizona. I should have probably been so busy I didn't get a call over there to see how many rolls we've sold to Arizona. So I don't have an exact count, but I know we still have some of the Silver Eagles that were in the sealed cases. I know we sold most of those on Friday last week, and we've been getting rid of the rest of those throughout this week. $810 a roll. One more day. I was not going to do that today, but it's silver's down a little bit, so we'll go ahead and you're still way ahead because we were selling these at this price when silver was like $38 an ounce. Now it's at $39 an ounce, so you're making good money when you buy this silver. 800-951-0592. $20 Liberties. Take advantage of those. The $3,495 each. Get your savings in order. Get gold and silver put away, and it's always a nice comforting thought when you're sitting there and you got gold and silver sitting in your savings, knowing that if you really need it, you've got it. That's what savings does. Savings gives you security, peace of mind, and physical security when it comes to paying bills. Especially those little emergencies that come up that you never know. There's always those things about between minor emergencies to major emergencies. If you're lucky, you don't see those for not too often. Minor emergencies seem to creep up once, twice, 3 times a year. And when it's a financial minor emergency, it's always nice to know that you're all set. You're good to go. Because I remember when I was younger when. I had no savings. Some emergency. I was a pizza delivery driver, so every time the car blew up, I had to get something fixed. I had a mechanic father, so he was able to fix. He rendered services for me for free, but I still had to buy the parts. It's one of the reasons I drove an '87 Toyota Corolla hatchback up to about 400,000 miles. Is because I kept going to the local parts store. It was Checker Auto Parts, and they do lifetime warranties on parts because they're not expecting you to drive your Corolla for 400,000 miles. So I went through like 3 alternators and all sorts. So I got to the point. It was kind of a big loss when that car got totaled because I kept going back to the parts store every time something fell off, and I'd already replaced pretty much everything that falls off your car regularly. So I was able to get it a little cheaper, but I know what it is to have a car and suddenly, your transmission needs a $5,000 repair. What do you do if you're delivering pizzas and have no savings? It's not a good feeling to go have to figure that out. The gold and silver people out there, you can just bring a gold coin, a couple gold coins over to Patriot in Arizona or here in Colorado, cash you out, go pay for it, and life doesn't seem to be too disturbed when you've got it in savings. We do the Texas coin. That's investment. It's different territory. Savings is what keeps you safe, keeps that peace of mind. I highly suggest you get any of the gold or the silver specials that we've been running this week. It's to your benefit. Once again, that's the Canadian maple leaf roll, 25 ounces in the roll of 0.999 pure silver, $985. I sold several rolls of those yesterday during the Texas meeting in Colorado. We had about 30 people show up to that Texas meeting. We had a good showing. But we also have Silver Eagles at $810 a roll. I bet when Joe gets back, you probably won't even be sniffing that price at all. That's just Joe's going to be back Monday, and so these Canadian maple leaf rolls and these Silver Eagle rolls, which are still vaguely available, very few of them available. I would jump on it, and then of course $20 Liberties, $3,495. 800-951-0592. We're going back to the video I've been playing throughout the course of the week. I'm going to really try to crank out as much of this as I can to finish the show. A history of central banking and the enslavement of mankind. Stephen Midford Goodson. When we come back, we're going to run right into that. Welcome back. Patriot Radio News Hour. Here we go. Let's just jump right into it. What we've been playing all week. A history of central banking. Go ahead, Jack.
In the event since the inception of the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank in 1914, the U.S. dollar has lost 97% of its purchasing power, and there have been 19 recessions. The Great Depression of the 1930s, and the current Great Recession, which started in 2008, and notwithstanding mainstream media propaganda to the contrary, appears to have all the symptoms of a depression. Since 1910, the national debt has increased from $2.65 billion to $20 trillion in March 2017, while unfunded liabilities such as Social Security, Medicare, and benefits for military veterans exceed $240 trillion. The United States Federal Reserve Bank, instead of functioning as the people's banker of the bankers, has operated solely as a private bank for the benefit of private bankers. It comes as no surprise that in its 104 years of existence, its accounts have never been submitted to public audit. The following are the bank's principal shareholders: Rothschild Banks of London and Berlin, Lazard Brothers Banks of Paris, Israel Moses Seif Banks of Italy, Warburg Bank of Hamburg and Amsterdam, Shearson American Express, Goldman Sachs of New York, J.P. Morgan Chase Bank. The State Bank of the Russian Empire. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, a different system of finance, viz. State banking, had been adopted. From September 1814 to June 1815, the Congress of Vienna was held in order to settle the issues arising from the French Revolutionary Wars, the Napoleonic Wars, and the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire. Behind the scenes, Nathan Mayer Rothschild proposed the formation of a new world order concentrated around central banking. All the major powers, with the exception of Russia, were indebted to the Rothschild banks. Tsar Alexander I, 1801 to 1825, refused to comply with Rothschild's devious scheme and derailed it. Instead, he established the Holy Alliance between Austria, Prussia, and Russia, which was signed on the 26th of September 1815 by Emperor Francis I of Austria, King Friedrich Wilhelm III of Prussia, and Tsar Alexander. He also rejected Rothschild's offer to set up a central bank in Russia. Whether it was because he distrusted the shady banker or was aware of the perils of central banking is not known, but he wisely declined. However, his prudent behavior incurred the vindictive and unrelenting wrath of the Rothschilds, who, according to Major General Count Sheriff Spiridovich, were responsible for the assassination of the last 5 czars and would seek and obtain their Talmudic vengeance in spectacular fashion 102 years later. On the 12th of June, 1860, the State Bank of the Russian Empire was founded with the aim of boosting trade turnovers and the strengthening of the monetary system. Up to 1894, it was an auxiliary institution under the direct control of the Ministry of Finance. In that year, It was transformed into being the banker of the bankers and operated as an instrument of government's policy. It minted and printed the nation's coins and notes, regulated the money supply, and through commercial banks, provided industry and commerce with low interest rate loans. Its vast gold reserves, the largest in the world, exceeded the banknote issue by more than 100%, except for the year 1906. By 1914, it had become one of the most influential lending institutions in Europe. Not unexpectedly, Russia had the smallest national debt in the world. The following table reflects the number of rubles of debt per inhabitant. France, 288. Great Britain, 169.8. Germany, 135.6. Russia, 58.7. By 1914, 83% of the interest and amortization of the national debt, of which less than 2% was held abroad, was funded by the profits of the Russian state railways. In 1916, the total length of the main lines was 100,817 verst, or kilometers. Russian commercial and canal tonnage of 11,130,000 in 1910 exceeded British merchant tonnage of 10,750,000. In 1861, Tsar Alexander II, 1855 to 1881, abolished serfdom, which at that time affected 30% of the population. By 1914, very little land remained in the possession of the Russian estate owners, who were mainly the nobility. 80% of the arable land was in the hands of the peasants, which had been ceded to them for a very small sum. This land was held in trust by the village commune, or mir. However, after the passing of the Stolypin Act in 1906, peasants could obtain individual title with hereditary rights. By 1913, 2 million families had availed themselves of this opportunity to acquire what became known as Stolypin farms. Nearly 19 million acres, 7,689,027 hectares, were allotted to these individual peasant proprietors by the land committees. The Peasant State Bank, which was described at that time as the greatest and most socially beneficent institution of land credit in the world, granted loans at a low rate of interest, which was in effect a handling charge. Between 1901 and 1912, these loans increased from 222 million rubles to 1.168 billion rubles. Agricultural production soared so that, by 1913, Russia had become the world's breadbasket, as the following table reveals. Russia provided 42.3% of the world's barley, 30.3% of the world's oats, 67% of the world's rye, and 31.2% of the world's wheat. Russian agricultural production of cereals exceeded the combined production of Argentina, Canada, and the United States by 25%. In 1913, Russia had 37.5 million horses, more than half of all those in the world. She also produced 80% of the world's flax and provided more than 50% of the world's egg imports. Mining and industrial output also expanded by huge margins. Between 1885 and 1913, coal production increased from 259.6 million poods to 2,159.8 million poods. Cast iron production rose from 25 million poods in 1890 to 1,378 million poods in 1913, and petroleum production rose from 491.2 million poods in 1906 to 602.1 million poods in 1916. From 1870 to 1914, industrial output grew by 1% per annum in Great Britain, 2.75% per annum in the United States, and 3.5% per annum in Russia. During the period from 1890 to 1913, industrial production quadrupled, and Russian industries were able to satisfy 80% of internal demand for manufactured goods, a perfect example of autarky. Throughout the last 20 years of peacetime imperial rule, 1895 to 1914, the increase in gross domestic product averaged 10% per annum. With the Russian state bank creating the people's money out of nothing at almost zero interest, as opposed to the rest of the world where central banks allowed parasitic private banks to create their nation's money supply at usurious rates of interest, it comes as no surprise to find that in 1912, Russia had the lowest levels of taxation in the world. These very low rates of taxation also attest to the efficiency of the Russian government. Furthermore, throughout this period of state banking, there was no inflation and no unemployment. Between 1897 and 1913, state receipts rose from 1.4 million gold rubles to 3.471 million gold rubles. By 1914, the surplus on the budget account was 512 million gold rubles, and there was no increase in taxation. Throughout the same period, the foreign trade balance between exports and imports was in surplus. An indication of the financial health of the Russian economy can be gauged from the following comparative table of gold reserves. The gold reserves in banknotes are expressed in millions of rubles. An independent study by British lawyers concluded that the Russian Code of Laws and judiciary were the most advanced and impartial in the world. Elementary education was obligatory and free right up to university level, where only nominal fees were charged. Between 1906 and 1914, 10,000 schools were opened annually. Russian universities were renowned for their high academic standards. In labor relations, the Russians were pioneers. Child labor was abolished over 100 years before it was abolished in Great Britain in 1867. Russia was the first industrialized country to pass laws limiting the hours of work in factories and mines. Strikes, which were forbidden in the Soviet Union, were permitted and minimal in Tsarist times. Trade union rights were recognized in 1906, while an inspectorate of labor strictly controlled working conditions in factories. In 1912, social insurance was introduced. Labor laws were so advanced and humane that President William Taft of the United States was moved to say that the Emperor of Russia has passed workers' legislation which was nearer to perfection than that of any democratic country. The people of all races in the Russian Empire had an equality of status and opportunity, which was unparalleled in the modern world. His Imperial Majesty Tsar Nicholas II, 1868 to 1917, and his state bank had created a workers' paradise that was unrivaled in the history of mankind. On the 17th of November, 1917, the Rothschilds, fearful the replication of this extraordinary example of freedom and prosperity would destroy their malevolent banking empire, instigated and financed a Judeo-Bolshevik revolution in Russia, which wrecked and ruined a wonderful country and resulted in the deaths by murder and starvation, according to Alexander Solzhenitsyn, of 66 million innocent people. The creation and control of the Soviet Union. In Wall Street,
something not to be passed to because there's a lot of information. The Bolshevik Revolution, which is a banker-backed revolution, ended up between 1918 and 1957. 66 million people were killed by a banker-backed Bolshevik communist revolution, which ended up winning World War II and creating communism all over the world. America, England, France, Russia, and then Germany, when they lost World War II, all became communist nations. They call them different names, but essentially it's what the Bolshevik Revolution stopped with what you just heard, which was a well-run, well-efficient economy that made Russia very powerful for the citizens to grow and be prosperous. The Russians learned this from America. America lost their system of growth and the citizens' ability to prosper in 1913, and then the Bolsheviks came in shortly after that, took care of the Russians, and as you can see, the bankers wanted Russia back. They wanted America to be banked, and then just what was left in Europe was Italy and Germany, and that's what World War II is about. Jack, go ahead.
In the Bolshevik Revolution, author Professor Anthony Sutton, with the assistance of State Department documents and personal papers of American international bankers, details the enthusiastic alliance of Wall Street and Marxist socialism. Without the financial support of J.P. Morgan's Guarantee Trust Company, John D. Rockefeller's Chase National Bank, Jacob Schiff's Kuhn-Loeben Company, and Ulf Aschberg of the Swedish Nordbanken, the Judeo-Bolshevik Revolution would not have succeeded. Of more particular interest in the financing of the revolution is the role which Maxim Litvinov, 1876 to 1951, who was born Meyer Genoch Moskowitz Wallach Finkelstein, played as a revolutionary in destroying Imperial Russia and handing it over to the international bankers. Litvinov commenced his revolutionary career in 1898. In 1901, he was arrested and spent 18 months in prison, from which he escaped. In 1903, he was entrusted with money, which was used to finance and distribute the newspaper of the Russian Socialist Democratic Party, Iskra, which was printed in London. In 1905, Litvinov received further funds from Friends from Abroad, which enabled the purchase of arms, again in London. Thereafter, Litvinov, now known as Papasha, or Daddy, became the source of all foreign funds and was appointed treasurer of the party, a decision which Lenin could not overrule, because Litvinov was a representative of the Rothschilds with powers exceeding those of Lenin. Lenin was merely informed of the decision. A few months later, at a meeting in Geneva, Litvinov was elected Secretary of Foreign Transport Groups. Lenin was again informed of this decision. Litvinov was never a genuine revolutionary, but instead used Bolshevism as a disguise in order to advance the aims of his master's agenda. From 1908 to 1918, Litvinov resided in London with the assistance of his English friends. During this period, he held a variety of occupations, working for a publishing house, Williams & Norgate, a tourist agency, and selling farm machinery. Presumably, these occupations provided a suitable cover for his clandestine activities. In 1914, at the outbreak of World War I, the Russian government demanded that all its citizens be returned to Russia in order to serve in the army. However, the British authorities allowed Litvinov to remain. In 1916, Litvinov married a daughter of one of the most distinguished Jewish families in England, Ivy Lowe. On the 3rd of January 1918, Litvinov was appointed as the authorized representative of Soviet Russia. One of his first tasks was to demand that the money held at the Bank of England on behalf of the Tsarist embassy be handed over to him. The bank duly complied. In September 1918, a conspiracy against the Bolsheviks involving British ambassador Robert Bruce Lockhart was exposed. Both Lockhart and Litvinov were arrested by their respective governments, and as a result of a subsequent exchange, Litvinov returned to Moscow. His new assignment was to secure fast outflow of gold and jewelry from Russia via Scandinavia under the cover of a scheme to purchase steam engines later known as gold engines. A quarter of Russia's gold reserves were transferred to Sweden for onward transshipment. For the Rothschilds, it was now retribution time. On the 21st of April, 1921, Litvinov was appointed Commissioner of the Council of People's Commissars for Currency Transactions and Sales of Gold Abroad. Several hundred millions, rubles, of our gold went through my hands and was sold abroad. I sold the majority of this gold directly or through various intermediaries to large French companies, which remelted this gold either in France or Switzerland, and then this gold went to its final destination in storage at the American Reserve Bank.
The American Reserve Bank. Jack, go ahead and pause it there. We'll hit a quick break, and we'll come back with a little more of the history of central banking and the enslavement of mankind. Stephen Midford Goodson. Welcome back. Patriot Radio News Hour. The number to call, 800-951-0592. Why? Because we got silver and gold on special. Gold's still holding. It's below 3,400 right now, but not that much. I'll get an update on the price as I talk about the special. We have silver Canadian Maple Leafs, 25 ounces to the roll, 25 coins, $985 while they last. And we have Silver Eagles coming out of a sealed case. Nice, crisp, white Silver Eagles. Nice and shiny silver. $810 a roll. Vastly underpriced. Super special. Should have been sold out Friday. Should have been sold out Monday, Tuesday. Should have been sold out yesterday. But, you guys are taking your time until it goes away. So that's your decision. But they're here. $810 rolls of Silver Eagles. You call 800-951-0592. We have $20 gold pieces. I have all this stuff here live in Colorado. I know that Arizona, I'm not sure what their inventory is. You can, if you order, you can ask if they have it available today. All this stuff that I got on air today is live here in Colorado. $20 Liberties, $3,495. You just got to call 800-951-0592. Silver's at $39.10, down about 20 cents. Gold is down about $12. It's sitting at $3,376. And so we're holding these higher price points. It just keeps on inching. It just keeps on inching. And one day you wake up, it's like, wait a minute, how did it get to $3,600 gold and $45 silver? And it just keeps on moving. So, Jack, let's go back. Let's go put this back on. Let's hear a little bit more. We're going to get about half of this whole thing done by the end of the day. Well, maybe the next time I'm on the air when I bring this material back on, we'll start in the midway point so you can hear the rest of it, because last year we didn't get through the whole thing as well. But go ahead, Jack. Let's hear some more of the history of central banking.
Owners of the FRB, the Bank of England, and Soviet Russia. As can be seen, the Bolshevik Revolution was little more than a giant asset-stripping exercise by the Rothschilds. In December 1921, the Kuzbas Autonomous Industrial Colony was established. It handed over control of a vast industrial complex to a group of American and European investors who had assisted in financing it. Thereafter, millions of gold rubles flowed abroad without any customs duties, allegedly as interest for the capital invested by European bankers, despite the fact that the investments were not all that large. In 1924, Joseph Stalin became the leader of the Soviet Union, but Litvinov, who feared no one, remained preeminent. His rudeness to Stalin was legendary. In the purge of 1937 to 1938, nearly all of Litvinov's deputies were arrested and then shot. Litvinov pleaded for the life of one of his closest friends, Boris Domonyakov, and informed Stalin that he could vouch for him. Stalin looked Litvinov in his eyes and replied, "Comrade Litvinov, you can only vouch for yourself." From 1930 to 1939, Litvinov was People's Commissar for Foreign Affairs of the Soviet Union. In 1939, relations between National Socialist Germany and the Soviet Union started to thaw a little. This was anathema to Litvinov's masters, who had nightmarish memories of the Holy Alliance struck between Austria, Prussia, and Russia in 815, and Bismarck's Drei Kaiserbund, Three Emperors League, concluded between the same three empires in 1872. Litvinov objected, but by this time Stalin had had enough of Litvinov's impudent behavior. On the 3rd of May, 1939, a quiet coup d'etat took place and Stalin dismissed the puppet of the banking underworld from the position of foreign minister. With its own state bank of the USSR, or Gosbank, which was founded on the 16th of November 1921, the Soviet Union had finally gained its sovereignty and independence from the international bankers. All Litvinov's deputies and heads of departments were arrested, but he himself was spared, as he was untouchable. Litvinov was allowed to retire to his dacha, but was kept under constant surveillance. In late 1941, Litvinov's services were once again required. With the Germans banging on the gates of Moscow, Stalin's desperate situation necessitated urgent help from the West. Litvinov was sent to Washington as Soviet ambassador. The Americans were reluctant to lend money to the Soviet Union, but Litvinov soon sorted everything out, and within a few weeks, a loan of $1 billion was granted. A lend-lease agreement was signed, and over the next 4 years, $11 billion worth of supplies and services were provided. Litvinov could call the White House at any time, and the president, Roosevelt, would see him immediately. Both these stooges of the international bankers pumped gold, the one out of Russia, the other from the people of the United States, into the vaults of Rothschild's Federal Reserve Bank.
So if you heard that right, during World War II with Germany pushing into Russia, apparently based off of this, well, Russia was just going to be conquered. Germany was going to force Russia into a different form of government, and the bankers came in. It's like, okay, Russia, we told you, we let you be independent for a little while, and look what it got you. So they, the Russian government then became centrally banked again to save themselves from World War II. Go ahead, Jack.
Litvinov was recalled in 1943 when the war turned in Russia's favor. His successor as foreign minister, Vyacheslav Molotov, provided an apt epitaph. Litvinov was utterly hostile to us. He deserves the highest measure of punishment at the hands of the proletariat. Every punishment. From the 1st to the 22nd of July, 1944, the international bankers organized a conference at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Its purpose was to establish a World Bank and an International Monetary Fund, which would govern relations amongst independent nations and maintain fixed exchange rates. Soviet representatives attended the conference, but refused to sign, stating that the proposed institutions were branches of Wall Street. This impertinence of Stalin in all probability angered the Rothschilds, but there was little that they could do while Germany remained undefeated. Between the 17th of July and the 2nd of August, 1945, the Potsdam Conference was held in Germany. It determined the new borders of Europe. From this time, the Soviet Union was gradually frozen out and the start of the Cold War commenced. Stalin had no designs on Western Europe. His army was completely exhausted, and he had more than enough tasks on his hands in absorbing Eastern Europe under his hegemony and repairing all the damage to his country, which he had inflicted on himself by provoking Germany into starting a preventative war. From a military perspective, the dropping of alleged nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was unnecessary, as in January 1945, Japan was already trying to secure surrender terms. The firebombing of these two cities served two more sinister purposes. 1, as a punishment to the Japanese for having set up their own state bank, and 2, as a warning to the Soviet Union, which also had a state bank. The Cold War was prosecuted, initially, by the Western countries in order to bring the Soviet Union to heel. Stalin, who was rather more of a nationalist than a communist, resisted and was allegedly poisoned and then allowed to die from a massive stroke for which he did not receive any medical treatment on the 1st of March, 1953. Thereafter, the Cold War degenerated into a farce, as the West, and in particular the United States, invested heavily in the Soviet Union. Huge investments were made at the Gorky plant, which built Ford trucks, and the largest automotive plant in the world at Volgograd, which manufactured Fiat cars. There was also substantial investments in aviation, computers, and electricity. The Soviet Union became an investment destination of choice. The Russians soldiered on, but with 50% of their budget being allocated to armaments, this was a war which they could not win in the long term. This explains why living standards in the Soviet Union could never match those achieved in the West, notwithstanding the provision of free services such as education and housing. In 1991, the Soviet Union imploded, and a swarm of advisors arrived from the USA who introduced them.
We got a little more coming on the other side of this segment. Stay with us. You're listening to the Patriot Radio News Hour. I'll be back in a minute. All right, Let's get back to more of this. I'll hit the special on the last segment, and we will move off towards Friday for the Patriot Radio News Hour. Go ahead, Jack. Let's a little more of the history of central banking. Go ahead.
The wonders of unregulated free market capitalism, which included income tax and usury. The primary purpose of these advisors was to present the law on the Central Bank of Russia at the right moment, which hardly did less damage than a whole army of invaders in making Russia lose its sovereignty. For almost 200 years, the Tsars and Soviets resisted, but finally, Russia fell entirely into the hands of the Rothschilds. Rothschilds' responsibility for the Anglo-Boer War. Throughout the 19th century, the world's monetary system was based on the gold standard, which had been developed and maintained by the Rothschilds. The discovery of the largest gold fields in the world on the Witwatersrand in 1886 created a new source of supply, which had to be controlled if this dishonest financial system was to survive. Unfortunately for the Rothschilds, these new mines were located in the independent Zuid-Afrikanische Republiek. Streams of immigrants and speculators soon arrived in the country. Some of them were British, but a larger number consisted of mostly Russian, Polish, and German Jews, with roving propensities and no strongly rooted attachment to an old country. The gold mine owners were almost entirely Jewish. The leading company was the Eckstein Group, named after its managing director, Hermann Eckstein. This combination included Consolidated Goldfields and South Neumann & Co. Professor John Atkinson Hobson writes in The War of South Africa, Its Causes and Effects, that Rothschild had a controlling interest in Goetz & Company, and that Rothschild stands for the Exploration Company, which is in effect Werner, Beit, and Rothschild. Furthermore, he adds that the dynamite monopoly and the rich and powerful liquor trade, licit and illicit, is entirely in the hands of the Jews. The stock exchange is, needless to say, mostly Jewish, and the press of Johannesburg is chiefly their property. By the early 1890s, the foreign workers and speculators had started to outnumber the Boers. In 1896, after the abortive Jameson raid, which tried to overthrow the Transvaal government, the South African League was founded as a Rothschild front in order to agitate for the granting of voting rights to the Uitlanders, or foreigners. In order to protect their status, the Boers would only grant the franchise after a period of 14 years of residence. On the 30th of May, 1899, at a conference held in Bloemfontein, the capital of the Orange Free State, President Paul Kruger offered to reduce the period of residence to 7 years. The British High Commissioner, Sir Alfred Milner, was unmoved and held to his point of view that it was reform or war. Eventually, Kruger, bowing his head between his big red hands, hot tears streaming down his bearded cheeks, cried out in anguish, "It is my country that you want." In September 1899, in an act of provocation, the British started to mass troops on the southern Transvaal border. A request on the 9th of October 1899 that Her Majesty's government cease the constant bringing up of troops to the borders of the Republic and the sending of reinforcements from all parts of the British Empire was ignored. 2 days later, war broke out. Although the Boers had only a part-time army of mounted horsemen, they enjoyed stunning successes in the initial phase of the war. However, they were ultimately outgunned, outnumbered, and in some instances, poorly led. From June 1900 onwards, the Boers resorted to guerrilla warfare. A tiny force of never more than 6,000 active Boers was able to frustrate and tie down almost 450,000 troops of the world's largest empire. Peace was signed at Vereeniging on the 31st of May, 1902. The war had been an unmitigated disaster for the Boers. In contravention of the Hague Convention of the 29th of July, 1899, which bound Great Britain to observe its rules of civilized warfare, an unprecedented scorched earth policy was introduced. The Boers' homesteads were razed to the ground, wells were poisoned, their cattle were slaughtered, and their women were raped. 25 towns and their contents and 20 villages, including all their churches, were destroyed. 155,000 women and children were herded into 46 concentration camps and housed in tents, where in some camps during winter temperatures fell below 0 degrees. 34,000 of them died of malnutrition, poor sanitation, and exposure, of whom 81% were under the age of 16. The British also suffered high losses, with 21,942 being killed, 35% in battle, 65% from disease, and 22,829 being wounded. The bankers had the satisfaction of obtaining full control of the gold and other mineral resources of South Africa, of financing the war in the amount of £222 million, and thereby adding a further £132 million to Britain's national debt. For Nathan, Alfred, and Leopold Rothschild, the Anglo-Boer War was a consummate victory. The Commonwealth Bank of Australia. The Commonwealth Bank of Australia was inspired by King O'Malley, an American, who found out the secrets of fractional reserve banking while working for his uncle's bank in New York in the 1880s. When the bank's first governor, Sir Denison Miller, was asked where he proposed obtaining capital for his bank, he replied, "What capital? I don't need any capital. My capital is the entire wealth and credit of the whole of Australia. With an advance of £10,000 from government, which was quickly repaid, the Commonwealth Bank of Australia was founded on the 15th of July, 1912. Although established as a private bank, it operated as a state bank, with the power to carry on all business generally transacted by banks, including that of a savings bank. Furthermore, the bank was entitled to raise capital through the sale of debentures secured by the national credit. Its profits were equally divided into two funds, a reserve fund to meet any liabilities incurred by the bank, and a redemption fund to redeem debentures or other stock issued by the bank. Thereafter, 50% of its profits were allocated for the liquidation of the national debt. For the next 12 years, notwithstanding the years of World War I, 1914 to 1918, Australia enjoyed one of its greatest eras of prosperity. By providing government loans at a nominal rate of interest, viz. 0.2% per annum, it enabled the country to embark on a huge infrastructure program. It included provision of 18.72 million Australian dollars for the construction of dams and the Murrumbidgee irrigation system, the Great Transcontinental Railroad, electricity power plants, gasworks, harbors, roads, and tramways. In addition, the fruit, wheat, and wool crops of farmers were financed for an amount of 3 million Australian dollars at nominal rates of interest. It made available 4 million Australian dollars to purchase 15 cargo steamers in order to transport Australia's growing exports, and 8 million Australian dollars were allocated to subsidized housing. World War I cost Australia 700 million Australian dollars, but it was financed by the bank as a non-interest-bearing debt. This phenomenal period of prosperity was terminated.
It just goes on, doesn't it? Every single country that prospers and does well without the central bank, then somebody comes in there and ruins it. And it's a repeating story, which is one of the reasons I like this content. It just over and over and over again. It shows you centralized control of a country's money is the destruction of its civilization. So we got one more segment coming up on the other side. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. Final segment, Patriot Radio News Hour. The number to call to buy gold and silver today, 800-951-0592. Get them while we still have them. You got Canadian Maple Leafs, $985 a roll. There's 25 ounces, 25 1-ounce pure silver coins, 20 pure silver coins in the rolls of Silver Eagles. Those are $810 a roll. And we have $20 Liberties, old pre-33 gold, bread and butter coin that we sell here at the Patriot Trading Group, $3,495. Call 800-951-0592. Jack, let's put a couple more minutes of this on, and we'll move on.
In 1924, when a bill, which placed control of the bank in the hands of a directorate consisting of a governor, the secretary to the Treasury, and 6 persons actively engaged in agriculture, finance, and industry for different terms of years, was introduced by Stanley Melbourne Bruce, Prime Minister 1924 to 1929, and Dr. Earl Page, his coalition partner. There is a suspicion that Bruce may have been bribed, as what he did was completely against the best interests of the Australian people. During his term of office, the Australian government borrowed £230 million from the City of London, and by 1927, the federal and state debt had reached £1 billion, and the budget was in deficit. On the 10th of October, 1924, the bill was proclaimed as an act. The subsequent effect of this act was to place the bank under the control of a body of men who later deprived it of the right to create the nation's money supply free of debt and interest. In 1927, the bank lost its savings bank subsidiary, and although it was permitted to continue issuing banknotes and thereby earn a modicum of seigniorage, it thereafter became a central bank operating exclusively for the benefit of private banks. The final betrayal of the bank occurred on the 20th of March, 1947, when the House of Representatives voted by 55 to 5 votes for it to become a member of the International Monetary Fund and thus subject to the decrees and dictates of the Rothschild-controlled Bank for International Settlements. World War I. World War I started on the 28th of June, 1914.
Let's pause it here, Jack. Let's pause it here because that's a whole another subject which we're not going to have time to get into. So we have about an hour and 50 minutes. It's an 8-part clip that's put in on YouTube, and you can look up the history of central banking and the enslavement of mankind by Stephen Mitford Goodson. It's 3 hours and 24 minutes. If you find the full part, you can find all 8 parts scattered throughout different sites that are hosting it. But we'll get more of this on the air. We'll start from the middle of this thing next time I put it on the air and go to the end because there's just so much proof and evidence that even though gold was used against the people in the past, still an outstanding asset to have, because if it's used as a weapon, you got to have a weapon to defend yourself from the weapon. So